On today's episode, we welcomed Diana Perez, who is a physiotherapist, sports physiotherapist, certified yoga therapist, yoga teacher, functional medicine, and nutrition consultant, which is a mouthful. She has so much experience in the sports and wellness world. So we knew that just having her on today was going to be such an interesting topic, which we really kind of honed in on managing our nervous system, how to get it regulated again, which I think is such an interesting conversation in today's day and world because everybody is like stressed, overworked, not taking enough breaks, tired, you know, have anxiety, like all these different things are popping up. And I think that just like recentering yourself and finding different ways as an individual to really regulate your nervous system is going to help you day to day. And who better to have than Diana Perez on the episode?
I mean, I was really, really looking forward to speaking to Diana today because I had the privilege to attend some of her workshops and I knew how knowledgeable she was. But I have to say that today just completely blew me away. I think she is like wonderful, so knowledgeable, so articulate in expressing all of her knowledge. And ultimately, I mean, I think when you look at a culture and or look at our culture and society, but even internationally, worldwide, people, their nervous system regulation is off.
Yeah,
And
there is
that
that.
is triggered by so many different things, right? So we're either in fight, flight, or we're in freeze. A lot of it's got to do with experiences, traumas, big traumas, little traumas, stresses, lifestyle, everything that we do on a daily, every single day is dysregulating our nervous system. So our parasympathetic nervous system and our sympathetic nervous system is really out of balance from what I understand or what I learned today. And there's simple techniques to bring it back into a more calm space. And one of them is including breathing. And that was a workshop that I attended with her, just being conscious of breath, how to breathe properly, how to work through things through breath. And if you have never even, if you've never heard about this or you've never experienced this or tried this or explored this topic, you're really going to love this episode because for me, it is such an important thing that we disregard on so many levels in our society and in every society because it doesn't matter where you live in the world. There's the stresses and the triggers are all going to be different depending on where you live and what's going on in the country that you live in and within your religion or society, whatever it may be. Anyways, I could go on and on about it. I feel like I'm popping off a little bit because I'm so excited about this episode because I just loved chatting with her. And I feel that her knowledge is just something that everybody needs to learn about and implement if they can. So we're very, very excited to welcome you to the podcast today, Diana.
Diana, welcome to Skin Talks. We are so excited to get into this conversation with you. Before we get started, I see that you're a physiotherapist, a sports physiotherapist, a certified yoga therapist, yoga teacher, functional medicine, and nutrition consultant. That's a lot. How did you end up in this line of work? What inspired you to get here? Just so our listeners can get a little bit of a history on who you are.
Okay, thank you, first of all, for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here and to share this with you and with your audience. So thank you for the invite.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit older perhaps than I look. A lot of people think I'm not as old as I am, but I've actually been in the physio profession for over 40 years, and I've been working in the fitness industry for probably 50 years because I started quite young teaching in the fitness world. So as you mentioned, my certifications are as a licensed physiotherapist in Canada, and I also have a qualification as a certified yoga therapist, which I did through an institute in the States, which took a couple of years. And I've been teaching yoga now for about 25 years. So got into the yoga world kind of a little bit by accident, actually. And that kind of opened up a whole door. So as a physio originally, I worked a lot in the sports field and high performance and with a lot of elite athletes and for many Canadian national sporting associations. I worked for the Canadian Olympic Committee. So I did a lot in the high performance area. I worked in pro sport as well, Olympic Games. I traveled as a physio with the Canadian national teams for several major games, including 2 Olympics. So that was kind of my area of focus in health and wellness from an athletic high performance perspective. But I was always kind of integrating that with my patients back home that may not necessarily be elite athletes, but who
Mhm.
still need to perform and function and be healthy and be pain free. So eventually, when I got into the yoga world and I saw what yoga can bring to the whole health and wellness piece, that just opened up a whole kind of can of worms. And it's a big journey that I started in 2000 that I'm continuing to be on. There's always so much to learn. There's so many advances. And so now what I do is kind of a combo of a merger of everything that I learned in physio, combined with everything I'm learning in yoga and yoga therapy, sort of like a hybrid of all of that. And then over the years, also because of high performance, because of personal interest, and because of the patients I was seeing, I've also did certifications in acupuncture and Ayurvedic medicine and nutrition, in holistic medicine, naturopathic medicine, and then eventually kind of tied it all together into a functional medicine certification. So that's kind of been the reason that there's all those letters or
Mhm.
titles behind the name.
Well, that's
Interesting.
very
That's like,
interesting.
yeah, that's really cool. I
Yeah,
mean,
it
that's a
is.
lot of years of like experience, especially when you're working with elite athletes, and then also just like changing your direction, but implementing like yoga into your physiotherapy. It's really, really cool.
Hmm.
Well, I
Yeah.
think that the thing that I'm realizing over the years and with time is really that everything's so interconnected, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And so it makes sense to me that you would have all these different specialties and kind of build this hybrid model of, I mean, really overall, ultimately wellness, right? And we
Yes.
know in today's world, the nervous system regulation is a big hot topic, and everybody's talking about that and like just overall general health. And I can't wait to dive into this conversation and learn more about it. Today, we really want to talk a lot about chronic stress and trauma and really understand how all this dysregulates the nervous system and why it's such a foundational issue when it comes to long-term health and well-being. Could we get a little bit into that, Diana?
Sure, sure. So, as you alluded to in the beginning of your commentary, more and more people are interested in this. Why? Because our medical model, as good as it has been for advancing medicine in many ways, and give it credit where credit is due, give doctors credit where credit is due, we're really moving back to the paradigm that existed in the old ages of that health is a totality of many things. We're not cars, we're pieces to be looked at like different systems. And unfortunately, that is what medicine did. And again, to the credit of medicine, by doing that, we were able to advance a lot of knowledge in the particular areas of the body. But the existing medical model just doesn't work. It doesn't work. Why? Because it's not holistic. A human being is a combination of biological, physiological, social, spiritual, emotional. Yoga talks about that, the 5 koshas, the 5 layers of the individual. And medicine doesn't take that into account. And unfortunately, even though kind of we know that, we've been talking about the biopsychosocial spiritual model of healthcare for many years, for many decades. We don't do it. We don't do it well. We don't do it at all.
We
You
don't
know,
even
people,
teach it. It's not even taught. It's not spoken
it,
about. Like it's
right.
it's
Right.
alarming.
The medical model has not shifted. So one of the things that I didn't mention initially about myself is one of my big areas right now where I'm focusing a lot of attention is on putting together a curriculum of courses on integrating yoga into healthcare, integrating the principles of holistic care into healthcare. And this nervous system regulation is the course that I'm currently working on putting together, because it's kind of like I've just realized we kind of missed the boat in rehabilitation by not acknowledging the importance of the central nervous system piece.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of attention has come on that, interestingly, Beata, because of COVID.
Yeah.
We looked at COVID, a disease, it's a virus. It affected almost the whole population of the world now has been infected. And obviously, we saw a lot of differing responses to the virus. Some
Mhm.
people got very sick, some people died, some people it was like a bad cold, some people it was like nothing, some people got it and didn't even know they had it. Um, but what came out of that is a lot of the population has developed long COVID. It's
Yeah.
actually quite a bit of an epidemic now that isn't quite acknowledged because a lot of people didn't get long COVID initially,
Okay.
but develop long COVID like symptoms. And what does that mean? It means a derangement of the body or the mind. On, I think, the last documented piece of research that was published in a very well-known medical journal, there was 96 different kinds of symptoms. Okay,
Really? I did not know that.
96 different symptoms in the body. So it can affect every part of the body. We talked a lot about the lungs, of course, and the respiratory system and the heart also. That came up a lot, in a lot of the news.
Yeah,
But
heard
pretty
that.
much every system can go offline. So when that started to happen and I started to become involved in treating long COVID patients, all my previous knowledge that I had developed over time, and I have a research background because I also did a master's degree in rehabilitation science. So I kind of have a bit of that science hat also. And I was thinking, there's got to be something that underlies all this. And sure enough, it's the nervous system. And then coming from the yoga therapy world, there was a whole slew of kind of focus on the effects of trauma on the body,
Mhm.
childhood trauma, life trauma. And again, what we were finding out is that there was a dysregulation of the nervous system. So, whether it's an external factor that affects the nervous system or whether it's internal, emotional, psychological factors. So, what do I mean by that? So, you can have physical illness, you can be infected by a virus, things like Lyme, for example. Lyme is a very
Yeah,
difficult
Lime.
condition
Yeah,
to get rid of, multiple systems, whatever. Again, people aren't focusing on how it impacts on the nervous system.
interesting.
And if we can get the nervous system to come online properly, to rebalance, to work the way it's supposed, the nervous system is the hard system. It's kind of like the hard part of the computer that runs the computer. Everything else are downloads. All the other
Interesting.
systems are downloads to the central nervous system. It's
Yeah.
the hard wiring of the computer. So hopefully I answered your question on that.
Yeah, no, I find it so interesting because I'm fascinated by stuff like this. I mean, I talk about it all the time in my life personally, just, and I love the point that you talked about with our medical system. There's so many great things about our medical system, but we rely on our medical system to fix us. And it's really, it's it does that, but there's so many other layers underneath that we can't rely on that. So we really have to take our health in our own hands. It's why we love to have these kinds of conversations because it opens a lot of doors into exploring things that we don't think about and that, it's not even on the radar. But more and more, like you said, with COVID and all that, but just the pause during COVID made people reflect, I think, a lot too. And the whole wellness space started to boom just because people had that time and break away from the intensity of life and having to drive to work every day and stuck in traffic. And we're coming back to that and we're unbalanced again. And I'm speaking personally also because it's really easy to get caught up in all this. But I have a lot of curiosity around things that you can do on the daily to help manage all of that. And I think that focusing on the nervous system is essential in life, and we don't talk about it enough. And there's ways to do that also, which I know we're going to get into today. But I
Mhm.
just find it very fascinating and very interesting. And I really want people to know about this.
Mhm.
I want to know, like, for somebody who's like listening to this episode and like has no idea even like really where to start or like what the nervous
What
system,
it is, right?
want
The
to like
systems.
break it down
Yeah.
for, so like what's the nervous system? What is it responsible for in a way? Just like a super easy explanation. And then we can get into like certain ways that you can regulate. your nervous system
Sure.
was.
Yeah, that's a great question. Before I do answer that question, though, you guys are obviously very dialed into the wellness space and what it takes. So I just want to make one comment. The medical system is not there to make you healthy.
No,
The medical
exactly.
system is there to
Yeah, it's very
address
true.
when you've kind of fallen apart and you're very ill. And in certain cases, it's extremely helpful. They save your
It's
life. In emergency medicine, for example,
100%.
like what we now know in emergency, there's many things you would have died from before that now they can save your life.
Yeah.
But if you're looking to be healthy, you have to stop looking outside.
Yeah.
You have to look at yourself. If you
Yeah.
want to be healthy, you need to take responsibility for your own health. You need to figure it out for yourself. I know that it's kind of a bit hard sometimes because there's a plethora of information, which is fantastic, but there's almost too much. And some of it is controversial and some of it is, conflicting. And so it's kind of hard to maneuver all that. So my advice is, get dialed in with people who are reputable, who have either research backgrounds or MD backgrounds, and who are not selling you a ton of product, because I always, worry about the conflict of interest of that. But if you want to be healthy, you need to start taking charge of your own life. So I know you guys are all about that. I saw some of your podcasts. This is what this is all about. But in answer to your question about the nervous system, so the nervous system is obviously the brain and all the nerve network. And there's a voluntary nervous system that we use, to activate our muscles and move and, do things like that. And then there's what we call the autonomic nervous system, which is the background nervous system that kind of is running the whole body without you being conscious of it. You don't think about breathing. You don't think about your heart rate. You don't think about the billions of activities that go on all day, all the enzymatic reactions, it's just unbelievable, like what happens in the background. But the autonomic nervous system is what controls that, is what kind of comes online to control that. Now, the autonomic nervous system has, everybody knows, the fight flight component to it, and now there's a freeze component, which I'll talk about more in a minute.
I heard that.
Right? So there's fight, flight, and freeze. And then there's a component, so that's a sympathetic nervous system. That's the autonomic nervous system has a sympathetic division and a parasympathetic.
Yeah.
The parasympathetic is the rest, the digest, and the heal. Right? So a lot of people are moving in the world with chronic pain for many reasons. And part of it is because we're perpetually kind of in a stress mode and we're not allowing the body to go into the state that is required. So you have this sympathetic, parasympathetic. Now, what's interesting is the freeze response is kind of a parasympathetic response, but an extreme parasympathetic response, right? So an animal or a human, when faced with a very challenging situation, will either fight if you can, fly if you can't fight or you know you're not going to win, so you fly, or particularly with trauma, if you can't do either, you may go into a freeze response. So that allows you to kind of feign, to pull away, to, from a physical perspective, when we see it in animals, they kind of collapse and go on the ground and they kind of roll into a ball and they look like they're dead. And their heart rate really lowers and their breathing really lowers. So they feign being dead as a way to kind of get the prey to kind of smell them and say, oh, they're not interesting, he's not moving, whatever, and hopefully walk away. From a human perspective, unfortunately, that doesn't work so well because that freezing response, which, for example, as a child, or if you're in a situation where you just can't fight or flight, even as an adult, you switch into that freeze response and it can become the response that is embedded in your body for the rest of time until you work it out. So you can overcome these things, but often we're not even aware that we're in a freeze response.
I am loving Jan Marini's Luminate Eye Gel. I've been using it for months and it's my favorite product for tackling dark circles, puffiness, and crepiness. It's packed with retinol power, but gentle enough for everyone. And if you're dealing with milia, its gentle formula hydrates without being too rich. You apply it under eyes only and never on the lids. And remember, as with most retinols, there's an acclimation period. So start slowly, like 2 to 3 nights per week, and then gradually increase to every night. I promise you won't be disappointed. If you want to try this product, go to bskinenvy.ca. That's bskinenvie.ca and use code SKINTALKS to get 10% off your first order.
I want to just quickly clarify, is like a disassociating, is that like a form of freezing? Like where you kind of just like go into your body and you're just like your brain protects itself, so you're dissociating from what's happening?
Like you hear about that a
100%.
lot with like rape victims, like they
Correct.
detach. Yeah.
Correct. And they detach from their bodies, right?
Mm-hmm.
They come out of their bodies because being in the body is a very painful and traumatic experience, like people with PTSD. And they can disassociate also psychologically from being engaged with people, from being, not interacting in the world. What we know with people with trauma, because there's been a lot of study, there's an ACE study, adverse childhood events study that was done that brought a lot of attention to this. And there's an ACE questionnaire that is free that you can just Google ACE questionnaire. It'll come up online and you can fill it in. It's, I think, 15 questions. And then it gives you a scale of like, if you have X number, you're okay. If you have more, you're more at risk, etc. The higher your ACE score, so the more traumatic events that you have experienced in your life, the very direct relationship to poorer health outcomes, more disease, more mental health issues, and also it actually directly impacts on the quality of your life. So people who have a lot of trauma have difficulty, even in an interview for a job, they don't come off good. They don't come off well. They come off disassociated, kind of tampered down. So the interaction, people say, well, no, we're not going to hire that person. They don't really know why, but it's that sense that there's like a lack of engagement of this individual. So it impacts on their ability to kind of be successful, quote unquote, in life, or to achieve things in life that, ideally bring them some sort of revenue, some sort of joy, some sort of satisfaction, to make them happier. That's the trauma part. And many of us have trauma, and I think we have to be a bit careful because it's kind of we're jumping on that and like everybody's traumatized now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
but the human experience is traumatic. Who goes through life without trauma? But there's big T trauma, what we call big T trauma, very serious situation. And I'm not downplaying those by any means. And these are serious, kind of events in life where people usually, not always, may need some assistance and kind of, getting over that. But then all of us also have little T traumas in our life with different things.
Mm-hmm.
And our perspective on that is what determines whether it's going to move through your body. So you live the experience and can you digest it emotionally, psychologically, and then let it out of your body? Or does it get embedded in your body? Okay. Very famous book called The Body Keeps the Score was one of the first books to really document and sort of this concept. And then in the latter years now, very recently, I don't know, maybe 10 years now, there's been the polyvagal theory that has been put forward by Stephen Porges to give us a framework for understanding how the nervous system gets engaged by these traumatic events and goes into a freeze response or a fight-flight response. I would say that many of us, some of us have had trauma, and that's an issue, and some of us may be in freeze response. I think to a great extent, the majority of us are more in a fight-flight state. Chronic stress, constant, constant striving, constant moving, constant doing, constant, whatever the barrage of things. So we can have a activation of the nervous system to become dysregulated, not just from trauma, but just from living a crazy life, which most of us do.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that most people in today's world are living that, right? To some
You
degree. And
know,
then you throw in what's going on in the world and it's got people like, right?
right. Even if you are the calmest kind of together person, just living in this planet right now with everything that's happening, that can dysregulate you.
It is, yeah.
You may not be aware that it's dysregulating because of background, but any situation that creates uncertainty, fear, worry, Nervous system is, oh, high alert. Let's go into our sympathetic. Let's be prepared. We don't
I
know
just
what's
wanted
coming.
to ask you something, Diana. So how would somebody, kind of going back to what Tash said before, and I apologize if I might have missed this, but let's say, for example, you're in fight, flight, or freeze. How can somebody actually, like, what kind of symptoms show up? We talked about stress, we talked about like different things, but even stress is a word that's very used. It's thrown around really easy. Like, I'm traumatized, I'm so stressed, I'm so this, I'm anxious, I'm, right? How would somebody in their body identify that they're in that state?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm going to differentiate a little bit between being in the freeze response, which is
Mm.
more sort of the disassociation we talked about, being kind of shut down, and then being in fight flight. So let's not talk about the trauma piece, which is a very important and more complicated. Like we could get into a whole thing about that on its own. But let's just talk about the majority of us who have had maybe little t traumas and just stress, the stress of life, and just living in the world as it is today. The way it manifests is like a myriad of symptoms, and pretty much every chronic health disorder with has a nervous system dysregulation component. So pretty much everything. So what are the typical things? Overwhelm, fatigue, chronic fatigue. You're perpetually tired all the time. Issues with brain fog, difficulty concentrating, impatience, sensitivity to light, to sound, to any kind of external stimulus. The nervous system is so overwhelmed that anything coming in is just like, oh my God, I just can't handle it. The myriad of physical manifestations of symptoms, from headaches to skin conditions to any of the chronic diseases we talk about, whether it's diabetes, whether it's heart disease, whether it's respiratory issues, whether it's physical like musculoskeletal, that a myriad of it. So many people now are, when I started practicing physio, people would come in with quote unquote injuries. They would twist their ankle, they would fall, they would bruise themselves, whatever, or pick up something and strain their back and come in. And we would do physio, and 4, 6, 8 weeks later, they would be fine. Now they come in and the same type of injuries, but they go into chronic pain. The condition heals, but the body has the nervous system is still on hyperdrive because
Hmm.
it started in hyperdrive. The nervous system was already dysregulated. And so now it doesn't balance to bring the pain back down to
Can't
zero
catch
once the
up with
tissue.
itself almost, right? It's like it's such on overdrive that it just can't recuperate with a night's sleep or a 2-week vacation or anything because
Correct.
it's
Correct.
so unbalanced and
Correct.
stimulated.
Correct. So chronic pain, I would say, is probably now chronic pain again is another topic that's very complicated. We could have almost a whole podcast just on that. But we're seeing a lot of chronic pain, which we weren't before so much. And again, dysregulation of the nervous system. The nervous system is perpetually fight flight. It means it's always in a fear, preparing for an event, right? So how can you completely heal? How can you completely kind of,
Yeah.
re-regulate the body from
It's
that?
crazy. It's so
Digestive
crazy.
issues. Digestive issues are
Yeah.
the number one complaint. So actually, the number one complaint of people going to their GPs is fatigue. That's become number one. Number two is digestion. So think about it. Fight, flight all the time, never in parasympathetic. How can your digestion work? It can't. You have to
Yeah.
be in parasympathetic for digestion to work. When you're in sympathetic, digestion gets shut down. So what do we see? IBS, issues with constipation, with diarrhea, with GERD, more advanced things like celiac and Crohn's, which are a little more complicated, but fundamentally still have a nervous system regulation issue. Um, so that's kind of a bit, and I haven't even hit all of them of the symptoms that people can be suffering from. So pretty much everything.
Right. And it's so interesting because when we go and seek medical assistance, because we feel sick or tired or something's wrong with us, right? These kinds of things are never spoken about, like never asked, really. It's only like, and again, I'm not knocking the medical system because I have a huge admiration for it, and I think it's wonderful in so many different ways. But I mean, when you're in fight or flight and you're experiencing brain fog or like, not able to sleep, irritable bowel system, they never really ask you what's going on in your life, right? They just give you something to take to cure
Correct.
or to apparently cure. So, or it's like band-aiding the issue, right? So over a
It doesn't cure
lifetime,
it.
it,
It doesn't
yeah,
cure it.
it's a
It's covering the
band-aid.
symptom, right? It's
Yeah. And
very
then
rare that they'll cure
yeah.
you. Yeah. Yeah.
So then you end up with this accumulation over years and years and years and years and medications and all of this stuff. And it's like, you know, it's
Yeah.
it's like a daunting thought. But the good news is that there's ways that you can work around this if you become aware of it and you understand that this is maybe something that's actually happening to you. Then uh, you can take the measures in your life to be able to work on it, to attack it
100%.
in your own way, right? And maybe we could talk about that
Sure.
a little bit. Like,
Um,
go ahead.
yeah, a couple of other symptoms too that I'll mention to finish up my previous is what we're seeing a lot too is people with hypersensitivity to food, to toxic, like to environmental things. People all of a sudden are becoming like allergic to everything. They can't eat anything. So they're eliminating tons of things from the diet because everything doesn't feel good. There's also even histamine intolerance, mast cell activation syndrome. There's all these things that are happening. This again is a nervous system that's dysregulated, and so it perceives everything like a threat. And so it's mounting an immune response. Well, we need to understand the nervous system is controlling everything. So it's interrelated with the immune system, it's interrelated with the hormonal system, it's interrelated with the cardiovascular respiratory system, it's interrelated with the musculoskeletal system. So definitely is nervous system dysregulation the cause of everything? No, I'm not saying that. But fundamentally, very important. In addition to the comment I made about you want to be healthy, you got to take charge of your own health, not wait for other people to do it for you.
Yeah. Yeah,
The second
absolutely.
most important thing is we need to do the basics, and we don't. We have become so disconnected from who we are. We're animals. We're just an animal with a big brain who thinks that we're not animals. But we're animals. So we are no different than any animal in the animal kingdom who is subject to all the things that are required for health. What is that? We're supposed to work on a circadian rhythm, you know? So there's supposed to be a circadian rhythm that you follow. Certain time when you go to bed, certain time when you get up, certain time when you eat, certain time when you sleep, there's all kinds of things related to that we're totally dysregulated because we live inside. One of the very important things for circadian rhythm is light, is outdoor light, not indoor lighting. So we have an insufficiency of outdoor light. So what is one of the major symptoms of people now too, in addition to, the gut and fatigue? It's sleep disturbances. You find me one person that tells you that they sleep fantastic, and I'll be surprised. There
I
are a
know.
few. Yeah, there
You
are a
might get a
few.
couple nights. You might get a couple nights. Oh my gosh, I slept well for 2 nights in a row, and then whoop.
Right,
I
exactly.
have this aura ring, and that's the first thing I do almost every day is I'm like, how was my sleep quality last night? Because it affects me so much, and it's not been good, and it's clearly I'm dysregulated.
100%. 100%. But get a hold of this. So sleep is one of the most undervalued. Now it's becoming a big thing. People are
Yeah,
bringing attention
more and
to it.
more.
But one of the most undervalued because, we live in a society where productivity is the goal, right?
Yeah.
The more you do in a day, the more
Do,
you're
do.
fantastic. You're a great person. If you can knock off 30 things off your to-do list instead of 20, you're a superhero.
Yeah,
That's all wrong. That's
I
all wrong,
I agree.
right?
I agree.
So people cut on sleep. And sometimes you don't have a choice because, you have children, you have activities, you have work, you have this, and you're trying to fit everything in. And that's another thing. We're just overloaded. We're
Uh-huh.
overloaded. We just do too much. But if you don't get good sleep, nothing will work properly. Nothing. It is so critical. It's absolutely critical to every part of health. So if you're like eating wonderful nutrition and getting tons of supplements and exercising and doing all the right things and sleep is no good, you're missing probably the most important piece. So sleep is super, super
It is, and
important. Just
I've heard, Diana, I don't know if this is true, but I've recently heard that a lot of issues that we have with brain function as we get older, dementia, Alzheimer's, all this stuff is there's a lot of linking to the sleep patterns of life. Like people that have not slept well in their life, that have chronic, what do they call that? Um,
insomnia.
insomnia are what it hits them harder as they go into
Usually,
that time. I don't know if it's true, but I've heard.
it's very true. Very, very
Okay,
true.
fantastic.
The sleep studies are super compelling for the control of dementia and Alzheimer, which is on the rise in our society
Mhm.
for many reasons. There's other reasons also why Alzheimer and dementia, including toxins, including the blood sugar dysregulation. A lot of people are either diabetic or pre-diabetic. A lot of people are pre-diabetic and don't even know it.
Yeah,
Prediabetes is still, you're still poking the bear. You're still
yeah.
poking the bear for dementia, Alzheimer later on. But what people don't understand about sleep is that during the day, your body's functioning, doing all kinds of things to allow you to move, to do, to think, to, accomplish, whatnot. And there's a lot of toxicity that kind of builds up, which the body somewhat handles during the day. When you urinate, when you defecate, your kidneys, your gut, your liver, they're all working for you. But the brain actually only detoxifies at night when you're in the proper sleep cycle.
And
You need
which
a deep sleep.
that's the REM with the deep sleep and
Not the REM. The REM is the consolidation of
good.
ideas, of knowledge, of whatnot. It's the deep sleep that happens in the beginning part of sleep.
Yeah,
The deep sleep. So we now know that there are cells in the body, in the brain, sorry, that actually do a clearing function, a clean out function. It's kind of cleaning house. And if you don't have that deep sleep, you're never cleaning house. So imagine what your house would be like if you never cleaned it. It's pretty
Exactly.
simple, isn't it?
wow.
I have a question about sleep. You know how like you go into your light, your deep, your light. You know how like you
It's a cycle.
naturally there's a cycle, right? Like, is it normal that during that cycle there's a moment of waking up?
The ideal would be that you would never wake up, that you would allow that whole process to happen. For most of us, yeah,
Tasha's
That's
for
what I'm
most,
trying
asking
to
if
get
that are
away with,
so.
like, because I
that would
also
be
have
the
my
idea.
Oura ring, but I like mine when I look at my sleep, it's like it goes like light, deep, light, awake, and it goes like awake, awake, awake,
Yeah,
like every 30 minutes.
yeah. That's your nervous system dysregulated. That's your nervous system not able to allow relaxation enough to get you into deeper sleep. So I'm not a sleep expert, but I've been studying this quite a bit recently. And the deep part of the sleep is supposed to happen more in the beginning phase and the
Yeah.
REM later on. So the REM is, the rapid eye movement. There's more of a spiking. Ideally, you would sleep the whole night. Most of us need 8 hours, give or take. Give or take. But this thing that, and some people sleep 5 and they're fantastic. So there are outliers to anything. But for the most part, most of us need 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
Ideally, part of that sleep, a good couple of hours of it should be happening before midnight. Okay, because circadian rhythms affect the ability to get into deep sleep. Also, those people that say, oh, caffeine doesn't affect me, I can have a coffee at night and sleep the whole night. You might be sleeping, but you're not sleeping deep. If you've had caffeine in your body, you're not sleeping deep. So you are affecting your sleep, even though you think you're sleeping all night, which is great, good for you. Um,
Hmm.
so there's normal times in the night where you come out into lighter and deeper. Most of us kind of interrupt our sleep because we need to urinate. So unfortunately, we wake up because we need to go to the bathroom. Ideally, you're only doing that one time a night. That is not the case for most of us. So, one of the dysfunctions that we see with a lot of people, particularly when they're stressed, is they become mouth breathers at night. And this is not the only reason, but it is one of the reasons why we get up to pee more often. Because mouth breathing creates a certain level of pH change in the blood that the body is trying to stabilize. The body absolutely likes to keep temperature and pH in the body, very stringently tight. Those are two things that it will work super hard to keep at the expense of other things. So when you become a mouth breather at night, which many of us are, you end up having into a state in which your kidneys have to go on overdrive. And so you'll urinate quite often. You'll wake up every 2 or 3 hours to go to the bathroom. Like I said, there's many other things that can cause urination, but this is a big one that we're picking up when we're looking at respiratory dysfunction, which is all part of that nervous system dysregulation.
I have been using the SkinCeuticals PTOX for a couple of weeks now, and I have to say I'm obsessed. This product is a needle-free anti-wrinkle peptide serum that visibly reduces 9 types of expression lines and reveals glass skin radiance. It's a great product to start using when you're not quite ready for injections, or like me, it's the perfect complementary product to use in conjunction with my Botox sessions to maximize wrinkle correction. I even have a couple of friends who have been using the product and have noticed change in their skin texture and any deep wrinkles they may have. You have to try it. Trust me on this. If you want to try the product, go to bskinenvy.ca. That's BSKINENVIE.ca and use code SkinTalks to get 10% off your next order.
We've established like, okay, the nervous system, we have to take care of our own health. These are the kinds of things that can happen. This is, the symptoms of it. And let's get into a little bit more how you are helping people move from that survival mode into a state of like blossoming. And how are you helping people move through that? And I'm curious on that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so a word of hope. It's not all doom and gloom. So as bad as it all sounds, and as terrible as our lives are, that are totally incongruent with, this animal aspect that we need. Because when you look at people's lives, like people, they eat on the run, they don't eat consistently, they don't eat well. They don't exercise regularly, or they don't exercise for days, and then they go in the gym and bust it out for 2 hours. So um, there's many things that kind of we don't hydrate. Sometimes it's even hydration, the basics of hydration we don't do well. So the way that I try to help people is, the first thing is to bring awareness to how their life may be in disaccord with the basics. Like, don't ask me about supplements if you're eating at McDonald's every day. Forget supplements. This is not where we're going to start.
No.
We need to start somewhere else. So just the basics, so the word of hope is just cover the basics, do what you can, one little bit at a time until that becomes a habit. Then you change, another bad habit to a good habit. And you
Habit
just chip away.
stacking, right? We talk about it a lot, habit stacking.
Correct. Correct. Yes, because it's hard to change behavior. And sometimes it requires, changing the environment, changing the way we do things, in order to support our wanting to be disciplined to do something. So the first thing is cover the basics. So the basics are, sleep, nutrition, movement and exercise, and hydration. One of the basics really, when we look at, evaluating people that may have a lot of physical conditions, a lot of physical illnesses and whatnot, that are kind of hard to figure out, they're multiple layered, is toxicity. We're really exposed to a lot of toxicity, a ton, every day, through the air, through the water, through food, through creams, through things that we do on our body, through products that we use in the house. So that, I would say, that has become one of the basics, because if your body's full of toxicity every day, it's very difficult for your body to work optimally, and for your nervous system not to perceive threat, because it's seeing that in your body there's something to be worried about. So do the basics in those areas, and again, we can have a talk on almost every single area differently. And then with regards to, so if you're not doing the basics, then don't look for the supplements, don't look for the biohacks, right?
Yeah.
Do the basics
And
and
that is, I just wanted to add in parenthesis that I find people, they're looking for the miracle. Like they come in and they're looking for that miracle, and they don't look, and it's like in everything in our lives. We wait until we can't take it anymore, and then we want to fix it, but we're not willing to do the work, so yeah.
100%.
Mic
You're
drop.
100%. We want the pill. We want the magic pill. Wouldn't it be
Yeah,
nice to do whatever the hell we want? Take the magic pill and you're super healthy. Unfortunately, it didn't work. We
Right.
tried, but it didn't work. So you start with that. Then there's things that you can do to regulate your nervous system. So the nervous system is not, you're not supposed to be in parasympathetic all day long either, right? So there's a misunderstanding of it. Stress is good. Stress is a good thing, you know? It's just you're not meant to be in stress 24/7. That's when it becomes bad, when it's perpetual, and that is what most of us are living. We're living in a chronic perpetual state of stress all the time. So the nervous system is supposed to be this fluid system that can switch from sympathetic to parasympathetic and then come back, to normal, to center, ready to move and shift in every direction that it needs, depending on the needs of the day. So you should be able, if you were perpetually parasympathetic, you'd be sitting on your couch all day doing nothing. You would be so, apathetic and down. So you need
which is also
sympathetic.
very unhealthy, right? It's super unhealthy to do that because there's some people that do that, and
No,
it's
it's
not good.
not the right answer, right? You got to get, so some people
Balance.
are more in the freeze end, and so they're more like, low level movement. They don't want to move, they don't want to think, they don't want, because they have no energy. They have no
Yeah.
energy. But that's not the long-term solution. So trying to kind of work on so in addition to the pillars, also work on the amount of stress that you're facing every day. You're not Superman. No matter what you do, no matter how many things you do, biohacks, supplements, vitamins, this and that, there's just so much that your body can tolerate. And I think most of us have more on our plate than we can tolerate. We never take breaks. We don't pause in the day. We're go, 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 go. And then you lie in bed and you wonder why you can't fall asleep.
You're destroyed at the end of the day. I often say that I'm destroyed. I'm destroyed today.
You
Yeah,
you want your body to go from here to relax.
yeah, yeah.
Doesn't
And
work that way.
then you throw in screens right before you go to bed, and you throw in
That
like
too. That too.
alcohol. You throw in
That's a whole
all
other
these
thing.
other things. And
100%.
we're not giving
You've hit.
ourselves a chance. So yeah, I think this is a chronic problem, clearly.
So one of the ways though to bring your autonomic nervous system to rebalance is through breathing. You know, people
Breathing. Yeah.
really underestimate the power of breath. Breathing is a complete direct, like within seconds of changing your breathing, we can see changes not only in your central nervous system, we not only see changes to the nervous system, but just through a breathing practice for 5 minutes, if I were to do blood tests, if I were to do other physiological measurements to see how your hormones have changed, how your chemistry has changed, um, how the physiology of your body, and even at the genetic level. So we now know genes do not determine health outcomes. So this is another big aha moment for some of you. Only 3% of genes will actually express their disease in a lifetime. The other 97% are influenced by lifestyle and thought and mindset. So this business that, oh, everybody in my family had diabetes and everybody had this so I'm doomed, I'm just going to have it, I don't need to worry do anything about it, I'll just take the pills once it happens. No, you have the power in your hands to control whether those genes are turned on or not. When we do 5 minutes of breath work, we can actually measure changes in epigenetics. It actually switches
Wow.
some genes on and some genes off
Wow.
within that brief amount of time.
That's
Certain
right.
thoughts also turn genes on and off. This is how interconnected we are of mind body.
Yeah.
No? So sit on that for a bit and see just how
Yeah.
powerful breathing can be,
I
right?
know. I attended, Diana, one of your breathing workshops, and I walked away in awe because I've heard of it. You hear about things, you hear about this, you hear about that, but to actually experience it and to understand it, why don't you get into it a little bit about that? Like, what is a
Sure.
healthy way to breathe? because for me, when I learned those things from you, I applied them in my life, and it's hard to remember all the time to do it, but I
Yes.
do it when I go to bed at night. I meditate when I go to bed at night, and I breathe and I listen to meditation, and it's really changed my life. So I'd love to get into a little bit of, how to do that, and so
Yeah.
people can
Me too.
integrate it.
Sure. Yeah. I'm so glad that's working for you. Wonderful. So there's an example of a little change in behavior that's impacting, on your health, on your sleep, probably.
Very
So
positive, like just the awareness around it.
100%. 100%. So, you kind of, again, you hit the nail on the head. You guys are so good. It's, awareness is the first thing. So, um, like health, there's fundamental things, simple things that we can do to stay healthy. With breathing, it can be very complex, but I'm going to keep it very simple and just give you the fundamentals. So, the first thing is you have to breathe through your nose. Simple. Stop. The mouth is never to be used for breathing, even in high level sports. Now, there are several athletes who have actually come onto this knowledge. As a matter of fact, what's his name? The fellow who just won the Masters, the golf Masters.
McElroy.
McElroy. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So when he was interviewed afterwards, he actually alluded to the fact that one of the reasons he did so well, and he was a bit all over the place, was
Yeah,
that he's
emotional.
learned to keep his mouth shut for breathing. He never opens his mouth to breathe. So he's actually worked with a mentor of mine, Oxygen Advantage, Patrick McEwen, who's now really working with high level sports, but with the population in general. He's been around a long time. He was originally the originator, and not originator, but the one who spread the word on what's called the Buteyko method, because he studied with Dr. Buteyko, and then he wrote several books, and now he's developed a whole company that's really more for performance, which is called Oxygen Advantage. So keeping your mouth closed, your mouth is for eating and drinking, and maybe some other peripheral activities, which we won't mention, like kissing. But if you're lucky enough to get kissing. But the nose has, and I won't get into it here, but a myriad of functions. It's really a kind of a marble, and we can see why we're supposed to breathe through the nose when we, look at it, the way that it filters and humidifies. And this is the place where the antibacterial, antiviral first starts. So if you're breathing through your mouth, COVID, keep your mouth shut. Let your nose do the work for you. It also produces nitric oxide. So that's also an agent that helps with respiration in many ways. And it also works in tandem with the diaphragm so that you have better functional breath. So the first thing is if you breathe through your mouth, you need to break that habit. Now, a lot of people have a hard time doing that because their sinuses are stuffed up. They have a lot of congestion. Some people have very serious nasal deviations. If it's minor, it doesn't matter. But if it's serious, then they have actual physical obstruction. But that's not the common issue with people. Here's the kicker. The more you breathe through your mouth, the more that your sinuses become congested. So for a lot of people, they say, my sinuses are congested. I can't breathe through my nose. The reason your sinus is congested is because you're not breathing through your nose. So it's kind of a bit of a catch-22. Some of us may have developed a habit of breathing through the mouth because we had a bad cold. And of course, during a cold, there was a reason why we were congested and you couldn't breathe through your nose. So you had to use the mouth as the backup. And in some cases, people do have allergies. They are hypersensitive to whatever, dust, pollens, all different things. So there could be some real reasons. But even in the people who have allergies or who have asthma, when they breathe through their nose, it actually helps. It actually helps many of them improve. So, number one, breathe through your nose. If you breathe through your mouth, you've got to break that habit. And if you're a mouth breather during the day, you are definitely a mouth breather at night, which is super dysfunctional. So start by just closing your mouth. If you don't remember to keep your mouth closed, there's some tape that you can buy. You can put a little strip of tape.
Yeah, we have it. We carry it. It's called the
Okay,
Skinny Confidential
super.
mouth tape, and it's
So
quite popular. I have to be honest. People are buying it a lot.
Super. Yeah. If you're a mouth breather, I wouldn't start taping yourself up at night because you'll feel like you're suffocating. But start in the day as much as you can. If you can be aware and just keep your mouth closed without the tape, great. If you can't, use the tape. I needed the tape for exercising because I would always open my mouth when I was exercising and my need for air got bigger, I would open the mouth. So I used it as a way to train myself that even when I do heavy duty exercise, I breathe through my nose. I don't
Interesting.
open my mouth. Um, the second thing is many of us breathe up high in the chest area.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of, again, a catch-22. Our nervous system is dysregulated. We're in fight flight. And so the breath naturally tends to move into the chest and it becomes shallow and fast. Shallow and fast feeds information into the nervous system that we're in fear stress mode. So it's a catch-22. You end up kind of feeding into the nervous system, which then feeds into your breathing, unless you become aware of it. And then if you become aware of it and you catch yourself up here, bring the breath down low into the lower lungs. We call it a belly breath. Of course, we know the air's not going into the belly, but a belly breath is where the belly expands forward as you breathe down low because the diaphragm, which is domed, expands down and creates a bit of pressure in the abdomen area. And so the contents of the belly stick forward. If you breathe in your chest, you can practice belly breathing. That's a good start. But belly breathing is not functional breathing. This is not the way we move in the world. When you're moving around against gravity, you're standing against gravity and you're doing functional things, it's not belly breathing you should be using. It's what we call the umbrella breath. So if this is a rib cage, this is the top around my throat area, and this is the bottom around, the mid torso area. As I breathe in, there should be a natural expansion of the lower ribs, like an umbrella that opens up and then closes back down naturally. So true functional breath requires that the rib cage be engaged. And for many of us, because of our posture, because we spend all day in one particular position, especially the seated position, especially computer work, we're very stiff through our rib cage and through our back and through our chest. And so things don't move that easily. So we become dysfunctional breathers because it's so hard to breathe down there that we just go naturally into the chest. So chest breathing is kind of almost what everybody does these days.
Yeah.
The statistics vary a little bit depending on the research you look at, but we're seeing anywhere from 30% to 80% of the population are dysfunctional breathers. And interestingly, athletes are 70 to 80% dysfunctional breathers.
Well,
Yeah, the athletes are the worst
interesting.
because, they open the mouth and they breathe through the mouth. So getting out of the chest is number 2, coming more into the belly would be the next thing. So nose breathing, out of the chest, more into the belly, and then eventually also working on getting kind of that umbrella breath, if you wish, which is in technical terms, it's called the abdominal diaphragmatic breath. So in case somebody's looking for the actual research name for it.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And I know that from working with you that we go into certain types of breaths depending on our situation, right? And the fight, flight, freeze. And if you're very, very like before going into a job interview or before doing something, oftentimes we have a feeling of, you feel the stress coming over your body just by changing your breathing. You can manage like panic attacks, you can manage panic and anxiety, nervousness, and all these things that you experience as a result of certain situations just by breathing properly.
Mm-hmm.
And also sleeping, also, right? When you're falling asleep, there's so many things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
There's so
the
many
the
things.
breathing the breathing is critical, I think, because so many of us are dysfunctional breathers. We breathe through the mouth, we breathe in the chest. The other thing about breathing is there's a lot of myths which you learned, from me and the course that you took. But one of the myths of breath is that you need to take bigger breaths to get more oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
And that is totally erroneous. So this is, I'm telling you now, there's no question, there's no doubt there. I don't care what you see in any other podcast. I don't care what you read. The biochemistry and physiology of breath is now well documented in the research. So most of us have enough oxygen in our blood most of the time. Unless you have some kind of respiratory condition or some kind of health condition, your blood is quite saturated with oxygen, 97, 98%, most of us. So that's almost full. Your body doesn't need all that oxygen in your blood. It only needs about 50% of it. The body has a redundancy of an extra 50% of oxygen in the blood because it's so important. Okay. So it's not oxygen. The body is not that concerned about oxygen because it knows it's there. Now, when you start to move, you start to exercise, whatever, your oxygen saturation rate will go down because you're using more oxygen, right? So it will go down. So your breathing needs to get faster. You need to breathe perhaps a little deeper. And that again is questionable because when we train our athletes, we actually tell them not to do that, but that's another topic. But so what determines how much breath you really need is how much carbon dioxide is being built in the body as a function of activity of the body, all the cellular activity. And if you're moving, you're exercising, obviously carbon dioxide levels are going up. The brain reads carbon dioxide, which also affects the pH, the acidity of the body. So what the brain is reading is carbon dioxide and change in pH. It's not reading oxygen. Your oxygen level has to get to 50% before the brain realizes that you need oxygen. It's quite
Oh,
dramatic.
interesting.
So when you take these big breaths, what you're doing is you're not getting more oxygen, you're offloading carbon dioxide, and you're making your carbon dioxide go down all the time. When you hyperventilate in the chest and you're breathing fast, you're blowing off carbon dioxide. When somebody has a panic attack, do you tell them to take bigger breaths? No. You take a bag and you put it over their
Yeah.
face so that they breathe in their own carbon dioxide to calm them down.
Yeah, I know.
Okay?
And we never think about that, right? Why do we take a bag? Why do we take a bag to
Right,
breathe when you're having a panic
right.
attack? It makes perfect sense.
So if you're perpetually incorrectly breathing, mouth breathing, chest breathing, fast breathing, deep breathing, you will be blowing off too much carbon dioxide. People who do this often are sighing, like coughing, they'll take a sigh, if you're catching yourself doing that often, that's a sign that your carbon dioxide level is too low. And your body resets to that low carbon dioxide, like a thermostat that has gone awry. The thermostat's supposed to turn on when it's set 80 degrees. Now it's turning on when it's 70 degrees, even though what you wanted is 80 degrees. So the carbon dioxide set is so low that now every time you move, every time you go up the stairs, every time you start walking, every time you feel out of breath. Why? Because your brain is saying carbon dioxide's going up, but it's a normal going up, but it doesn't read it as normal. It reads it as too much.
Okay.
And that's what induces panic attacks. So the interesting thing is, this is one research study that I found absolutely fascinating. There's a group of researchers that documented that people have panic attacks before they have the panic attack. What changed is their breathing pattern.
Yeah.
So it's not that they had the panic attack and the breathing change, it's that the breathing suddenly changed and induced the panic attack. Now you can use breathing to control a panic attack big time. It can definitely be used to, control it. So this big sort of taking a big breath can be useful if you're tight in your muscles and in your chest and in your rib cage and you're trying to expand the tissue. So it's not that you can never take a big breath. You can take big breaths. That's okay. But is that how you're breathing all day long?
Yeah.
It's how you're breathing all day long. Breathing should change as a function of what's happening. If you're nice and relaxed and calm, theoretically calm, which we've already said none of us really are, you would be breathing down low in your belly, relaxed. It would be soft. It would be, easy. But most of us are, quote unquote, in a relaxed state and still hyperventilating without noticing.
Chest breathing.
For me, when I discovered this in myself, I have chronic neck issues like for decades. It's almost 80% resolved my neck pain to get out of my chest breathing. It's unbelievable, the difference even for that.
So
Yeah, that's
interesting.
pretty
So just by learning how to breathe, this umbrella breath really will help ultimately improve every aspect of your health and help it will help to regulate your nervous system into
It does.
more
Yeah.
homeostasis, right? And then you can incorporate other things. Like you said, your lifestyle is very important, but just breathing alone is a big component.
As I mentioned, breathing, even a short amount of breath, but of course, if you do a breath practice, you'll get more significant results. But I mentioned how it affects, the endocrine, the hormonal system, the immune system, the epigenetics, like it impacts on everything. Here's the interesting thing that I've been a member of the Heart Math Institute for like over 30 years. So they were the first ones to start to work into this area. But now we have a ton of research. When you go into a breath that's called a coherent breath, that means a breath, a nice relaxed breath that you're doing about 5 to 6 breaths per minute. Okay. So the interesting thing also, a little aside, is that many of the world's religions that have hymns, chants, different sort of things that we say or sing, they're actually in a coherent breath mode. They actually force you almost to breathe 5 to 6 breaths per minute. Now, why is this so significant? Because what happens when you get into this coherence breath pattern, and that would be difficult for most of us that hyperventilate or work in a chest. If you try to do it, you'll see it's forceful. It's not relaxing.
Yeah.
But let's say you worked on breathing and you managed to get into this coherent breath pattern. It actually changes your heart rate variability for the better. And that's a whole other topic again. So I'm
Yeah.
not going to, but for those of you that know what HRV is, it changes. But here's the kicker. Coherent breath, when we look at the electromagnetic signaling of all the systems of the body, not just the heart. So everything in the body works in a sinusoidal function. It moves everything in the body, the chemistry, the hormones, the immune system, the nerve. There's a sinusoidal type of activity, electromagnetic activity that happens, that is in nature. It's part of nature. When you get into coherent breath, if you've been doing coherent breath for like 15, 20 minutes, every single sinusoidal pattern in the body, regardless of what's tested, ends up syncing. So everything becomes synced. Everything is moving up and down instead of one moving up, one moving down, one moving at a certain rate, one moving at another rate. They all sync. And that is like a state of really being in this homeostasis where the body has a capacity to heal, where the mind, some people, claim is like a bliss. There's a sense kind of like you feel like this innate love, these states of what gurus used to call, states of higher consciousness. We can see those and we can create those. We understand the technology and the practices necessary to get into these states. Dr. Joe Dispenza is another one who does a lot of work in this area if you're interested in that.
I know him. Yeah, I listened to some of his podcasts and I'm fascinated with all this stuff. This has been so incredibly interesting, Diana.
I feel like we
And
could talk forever and like there's so many different subjects that we would love to touch on. But we'll have to have you back for this.
yeah,
I'd be
we
happy to
Especially
share what I
HRV.
know.
Especially HRV. I'm very interested in HRV because we have the aura ring, like we kind of see it, and like some people have the numbers so high, mine are always very low. So it's like I want to like really truly understand what that is. So we'll definitely have to have you back on for some more
and
convos.
Tash, I just
Yeah.
wanted to ask you because I did Diana's workshop and remember I came back and I just said, "Oh my gosh, like you should really," and you say you struggle with different types of breathing because it makes you feel anxious and you have troubles with your sleep and all that. I
Yeah.
think
I do
that
sound like a troubled person right now on
that's
the side.
right, but I think that for me, the summary or the partial conclusion of all that has got to do with your parasympathetic nervous system. your
I need
nervous
to go
system just
relax now and take a nap.
now you need to get into breathing,
Yeah.
because I think it would help you a lot.
Yeah.
But yes, thank you so much, Diana, for coming on. Like Tash said, we could go on and on about this same subject or this subject and many more, but we'd love to have you back one of these days because I think just kind of like touched on the surface of, this incredible opportunity that people have to be able to incorporate technique in their life to be able to live a more fulfilled, balanced, blossomed life in a way, right?
A
It's
hundred
so,
percent.
for me, it's promising.
Yeah, and I mean today, we discussed a bit nervous system dysregulation. We discussed breathing, how important. There's many other things that we can
I
do
know.
to nervous system regulate. So I agree. I think I would love to come back if you're happy to have me back.
Yeah.
But
We'll
I
do a
think we
part
need to
two.
discuss all these other things that
Yeah, we'll
potentially
do
people
like
could do.
we'll do like a part two and a part three. No, but
This this
I think
may
it's so important. I think it's so important because there's
I agree.
tools and things that people can do to improve their quality of life. And,
100%.
we have to take that in our own charge. Diana, you've given all of your information of how, to our team so that we can include it in the show notes so that we can, let people know if they want to reach you. You do consultations virtually as well, right? If people need help and
I do. Yes, I do.
okay, good. We'll make sure to link all of that in our show notes so that if anybody wants to book an appointment with you, that they'll be able to contact you for this kind of support and assistance.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to you both for what you're doing with your podcast, to get this important information, not just mine, but all the other speakers that you've had. And it's just fantastic. Kudos to you for making the world a better place by
Thank
empowering
you.
people with knowledge.
Thank you. We
Thank you.
appreciate that. Thank you for coming on today.
It was so nice to see you.
Take care. I look forward to our second rendition.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a moment to rate, review, and follow us on social at Skin Talks Pod. We'll see you next week.